Do you want to use the power of Instagram to gain new customers, but hate managing social media? Do you have a great business, but you're still looking to scale? This episode is hosted by the founder of GetLeverage.com, Nick Sonnenberg. Leverage is a premier marketing platform that pairs you with a team of experts for any big or small project that you want to outsource. On this episode of the Leverage Podcast, Nick sits down with Kathy Caprino, an internationally recognized career coach, TEDx speaker, and senior Forbes contributor who's dedicated to the global advancement of professional women. Her other specialty? Knowing how to write viral blog posts. She's had several that have received over 3 million views. Learn how she went from 18 years in corporate marketing to becoming a therapist and empowering women in their career aspirations all over the world. She also tells us how she's using Leverage to build her online course.
Welcome back to the Leverage Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Sonnenberg, and today we have a special guest, a Leverage client this time. Kathy Caprino is a career and executive coach, founder of Ilia Communications, senior Forbes contributor. We're going to write an article for Forbes in the next couple months, so watch out for that. And a national speaker dedicated to helping professional women advance. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Nick, for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So how did you get into, and you also have a podcast we just recorded called
Finding Brave.
Finding Brave, which that's exciting. So how did you get to become a Forbes contributor, a coach? What's your background and how did you get to where you're at?
All right. So here's the story. I'll try to make it brief. I had an 18-year corporate career in marketing and membership services and book clubs and publishing. And it's important to note, because it's a part of my whole thing, I basically took the first job that I was offered, marketing and science publishing. Although that's not what I wanted. I was, a writer and an English major, and I loved ideas. I wanted to work in a big fiction New York City publishing house, but I didn't. I just bailed on my dreams day one. And that career, and so I teach all of this, like turn my mess into a message. But that career was successful on the outside, but on the inside, it was not successful. It was bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. And when I hit 40, those bumps turned into full-blown crises, full-blown. Gender discrimination, sexual harassment, chronic illness, zero work-life balance. I had little kids at the time. I wasn't in the fabric of their life. Toxic bosses, narcissistic bosses, actually. Now I know what that is because I became a therapist. But all of it, and waking up, it's interesting talking to you on my podcast just recently, waking up every day saying, is this what I'm going to be doing with my life? This is it. That's what made me most sick every day. But what we were talking about before, I stayed stuck. I couldn't figure out how to change that.
Was that because you were scared that you wouldn't be able to be successful outside of the corporate world, or what was?
Everything I'm going to mention goes deep. Nothing is on the superficial level. It was a number of things. One, I had invested so much time. So at 41 with 2 kids in a big house, and my husband at the time was a very well-known jazz percussionist, and he had his own life, and that was, really illustrious. But to me, he was the creative one, and I was like the money bags. So a lot of it is lack of self-esteem, a lack of recognizing what I had to offer, being trapped by the money. Like I was making good money. I thought to myself, what could I possibly do? And it was not knowing what I would do if I could. And that's the issue I deal with a lot of people. If you won the lottery, what would you do, Kathy? I don't know. That's the problem. I'm so stuck. I don't know. So it was about 5 things that kept me very stuck. And I'm one of 2 kids, 2 siblings, women. And I was like my dad's, the son he didn't have, and he's passed away now, but he was a GE guy for 30 years, 7 patents. And I grew up thinking, well, that's the way to go, be in a corporate life. I never thought I could be an entrepreneur, never. So I didn't make a move, Nick. And what happened was I got laid off after 9/11 in this really brutal way. And 1 month after moving to a huge home that, we couldn't afford if I didn't keep that job. So I'm in my therapist's office crying, and he said, and I love this story, I know from where you sit, this looks like the worst crisis you've ever faced, but from where I sit, it's the first moment you can choose who you want to be. Who do you want to be? And I said, I don't know. I want to be you. And he said, what does that mean to you? And I said, I want to help people, not hurt people and be hurt. And from that discussion, I became a therapist, a marriage and family therapist. But what's interesting, and I teach people all about this, you're going to pivot and you're going to grow and morph, and you're not going to stay the same your whole life. You're going to stretch. If you're really true to yourself, you're probably not going to want to do the same thing for 40 years. Maybe you will, but I didn't. And I became a therapist, and while that was life-changing, it was dark and hard. Rape, incest, pedophilia, suicidality. And I found coaching, and I was doing coaching at the same time. And I found that when I had coaching clients, I was lit up. When I had therapy clients, it was darker and harder. But I also found that it was career coaching I loved, because kind of what you're talking about with what you did with Leverage, I saw an enormous need for professional women. Because back then, Nick, all these issues about women, they were not in the public conversation. Nobody cared about women's issues. They just weren't there. That's not what was being talked about. So I saw a need that women need new solutions to look at how their challenges are not the same as men's typically. Not all women, not all men. And so that lit me up from the inside to bring new solutions to the table. And so I did research for over a year, talking to 100 women about what is professional crisis, how'd you get there, how'd you overcome it, wrote my book, Breakdown, Breakthrough, started creating programs. But I think you asked me, long story short, how did I get to be Forbes on Forbes? So interesting. When you're beginning as a writer, you often don't think you're good. Like, what do I have to say? So I had a little blog, and very few people were coming to it. But I was a part of a networking group then called 85 Broads. It's now called Elevate. It's amazing. And they had a Forbes blog, and they said, okay, members, you can submit stuff. So I submitted something. It got published. Did okay. The second thing I submitted went viral. 80,000 views at that time. And I was, and I'll never forget it. The Forbes editor wrote, hi, do you want your own blog?
What do you think caused such virality? Did you have a really good headline?
I did. And what bleeds reads. It was the 8 damaging myths about what LinkedIn can do for you. Now, I'm an enormous fan of LinkedIn, 900,000 followers now. But what I was seeing is people, so this is, when did I start? 2011. LinkedIn was new, and people were acting like LinkedIn was going to save their life and obviate the need to do any kind of real networking, any kind of interviewing. They kind of thought LinkedIn was just going to give them a job. So it was, no, you're still going to have to look for work. You're still going to connect with people. You still have to present yourself in a way that's powerful. But it went viral because, people were like, what am I not doing that I need to do? And anything of mine that's gone viral, I've had one that got 8 million views, 7 million views, 1 million views. They're all kind of cautionary tales. If you don't do this, or if you don't understand this, things aren't going to go well. But I don't manipulate that. One that I did on LinkedIn, 6 toxic behaviors that push people away, how to recognize them in yourself and change them. And I wrote the thing in 30 minutes, came flying out, and it got 3 million views, and LinkedIn came and did a video. They sent a video to me.
Wow, that's crazy. I noticed that you have numbers in the headline. My editor, I'm a writer for Inc., and they do suggest that numbers can be catchy in headlines.
They call them listicles, and don't write listicles, which are just lists with no meat. But, I find, look at what we all gravitate to. I like headings. I like small digestible sections. I don't want to read a 10-page article that has no headings. I can't do it. So the numbers are a way to categorize things that make things digestible. I think it works, but not every time, not overusing, that method. That's just not going to work.
This podcast is sponsored by GetLeverage.com. Looking for extra help with your marketing efforts? From a blog post to social media strategy, we have someone to start on your project this week. Head to GetLeverage.com and get in touch.
With your coaching business, so you're coaching, you're geared towards women, coaching for women.
Yes, mid to high level professional women.
Gotcha. And I mean, it's everyone suggests, get hyper targeted or hyper niche when you are launching something. So totally smart to go after a particular target. What do you find different? Have you coached men before, or has it always been in men? And what do you find to be the difference in terms of strengths, weaknesses?
I love this question. And so, look, I'm saying from the get-go, I'm a feminist, and I've done a lot of research on women's issues. But I have worked with a lot of men. This is what I find. Now, I'm not trying to paint every woman with the same brush or every man with the same brush, but this is what the research shows. This is what my research shows. Because I was a trained therapist and because I went through so many hardships at work, I don't want to skim the surface. I want to dig deep. And, one thing, my next book coming out 2020 is on power gaps, close your power gaps. When people come to me, they know something isn't right. They wake up and say, I'm successful, but I hate it, or I'm getting passed over. Women who come to me are going to be open about doing the deep dive. And truthfully, Nick, everything is about what you learned in your childhood. And I say, even in the book, you are what your childhood taught you to be, unless you unlearned it, period.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for people, I work with a lot of people who had narcissism in their childhood. I know a lot about narcissism. If you've had emotional manipulation, you didn't develop healthily. Your boundary, you can't speak up for yourself. Your boundaries are not what they need to be. What I find the difference with men is they want to be more linear. They don't, and they can't go as deep as the work that I do goes. The problem is, if they don't go deeper than they want to, most of them aren't going to change what they don't like.
Well, what are your thoughts on plant medicine and MDMA? Because those are people use to go deep. Are you pro or against that?
Absolutely. Like any approach that helps us, whether it's, I'm kind of way into alternative approaches.
Yeah.
But I don't force them down people's throat. But
I've tried therapy before. I actually hired, Patty Tublin? Did I talk to you about Patty?
No.
She wrote a book called Sorry, My Dear, I Have a Business to Run. So she was a similar background to you, kind of.
Wow.
Put you guys in touch. She's awesome. I hired her for business coaching and communication coaching, but she was a relationship therapist and things like that. So I've tried a bunch of different things, and then I've never did drugs in my life, and then I tried some of these alternative therapies, so to speak, and it went so deep. It was like 10 years of therapy in like a couple hour session. It was really amazing.
I'm all for it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this may sound way too woo-woo for people, but I've trained in energy healing, where I've literally put my hands over people. And I mean, long story short, the first time I tried, I actually saw a video in my mind of this strange scene of a young girl with a blonde braid looking through a fence, and she was separated from these children, and they were looking at her, laughing at her. And I'm like, what is this? So I was a student. You had to share what you were seeing. And I said to her, okay, I don't know what this is, but this is what I saw. And she started to cry and said, that was me. That was me when I was about 12.
Wow.
And it happened, and I got bullied, and my friends turned against me. So, when you experience these things like what you did or what I did, they're true. When people want to debunk them, you're like, okay, you just don't understand. I know what I saw. And I know that she cried, and it was a trauma that was lodged in her energy system. So I'm all for it, whatever works.
What are some other kind of alternative therapies that you've become aware of that, people should take a look at and see if it's a good fit?
Oh, yeah. Let me think. I mean, this is not a therapeutic approach per se, but, meditation is all the rage. What I believe is we're not quiet enough with ourselves. So any way that you can, look what we've all got here. I got 500 things going on, and I'm 58. Younger people are so hyper-connected. Any way that you can stop that hyper-connection and simply hear yourself and feel yourself. Like, how many of us eat while watching something and having the phone. I do. I mean, when I eat dinner, it's when I have a half hour to watch the news. Yeah, but I'm not really fully present. So anyway, anything you can do, from yoga to gardening to anything that lets you be quiet and hear yourself, is going to heal you. This is not an alternative thing, but I want to tell you, my son, who's just graduating from college, we discovered he's got a pretty severe case of ADHD. And ADHD can, any disorder can kind of commingle with other disorders. So he's seeing a lot of kids who are ADHD, can't focus, but yet are getting stimulation through online gambling. Oh my gosh, there's just so much going on that more than meets the eye about our behaviors. So, I bet you know some people with ADHD in your world, Brett. Yeah.
Well, I was diagnosed with ADHD actually. I was on my friend Peter Shankman's podcast, Faster Than Normal. If you've ever listened to him, he's known for being the entrepreneur with ADHD.
He even writes about that. How didn't he write a book about how to build a business? Whatever.
Yeah, he wrote a book about it. He's also a leverage client.
Great.
He is hilarious. I mean, I think that a lot of super high functioning, some of the best entrepreneurs have ADHD. It's really just a matter of how do you flip it so it's a strength, not a weakness.
100%. Totally agree.
Yeah.
How do you help yourself focus when there needs to be a focus that maybe you're not passionately gravitating towards, but it's got to be done?
Yeah, look, like I couldn't sit through a single class in college. So I skipped literally every math class in college to the point where teachers would argue with me and it'd be like a scene to take like a final exam.
Was that because you just were so advanced? You knew it all?
I just can't sit for like an hour having someone talk at me. It needs to be more interactive. It's just the way I learn. Like I can't be talked at. I have trouble with movies. After the hour and a half mark, my foot starts shaking. So like I knew I couldn't sit in a class. So I taught myself how to study, and like I knew that if I studied in a certain way on a back then chalkboard with a friend of mine, that we took every class together and we did it kind of in the systematic way, we would do well. And we didn't have to sit through class because like we learned a different way of doing it. So it's just a matter of learning about yourself, I think, and how you operate. Sometimes maybe different times of the day can change. Maybe coffee instead of, I tried Adderall for a year. It was terrible for me. But for me, if I have a strong cup of coffee, if I work out at a certain time of the day, and then also just trying to always work on things that intellectually stimulate you.
You need that.
Yeah.
I want to say another thing. I'm an extrovert, although I'm becoming more of an ambivert as time goes on. I see that we have such a bias in the working world against introverts. And I wrote a Forbes post on, there's a bias and I'm ashamed to admit I had it. I would have a team, I managed a lot of people at certain points. And if we had to brainstorm and think quickly, some of my team members couldn't. And I'd be like, how do they not know this? How come they're, I was all over that. And I judged it negatively. Now that my son's an introvert, I see he was discriminated against in certain ways in the class, what you're supposed to have to do, that I think is discriminatory, that introverts don't perform in the same way as extroverts. So to your point, I think that part of success is owning who you are. I don't mean, not growing. I don't mean not changing when we want to change, but understanding and appreciating, hey, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert. It's got to look like this, for me to be happy. I was mentioning earlier, I have this very simple 6 dominant action style quiz. And it's styles that I'm seeing. Are you an advocate, or do you need to feel like you're advocating for something bigger than you? Are you a seeker? Do you feel like you don't want to get to a linear point? Yeah, check it off. You need to seek. It has to flow. You've got to honor who you really are, or you're not going to have a successful business or career.
Totally. Well, we could talk forever about all this stuff and probably have you back on to continue the conversation, but I want to be respectful of your time. Where can we find out more information on all the stuff that you're up to?
Thank you for asking. So KathyCaprino.com is the great first place. FindingBrave.org is my podcast. And where else can I send you? That's it. Stay tuned, I hope, for my next book on the 7 most damaging power gaps and how we can close them to rise in our careers and our businesses. I hope you'll stay tuned for that.
Cool. Actually, before I forget, do you mind just to tell the audience, because I don't normally interview people that are leverage clients. So what are some of the ways that you are using leverage?
Oh my gosh, I love leverage. So as I mentioned in my podcast with you, my right-hand person is now, which is kind of changing my whole way of doing things. So I have Becca. I want to develop a new course, Close Your Power Gaps and Rise, and a new kind of membership program that, for me, it's important not just to serve wealthy people who can afford my private coaching hours. So I wanted to scale what I do, but not have the team. So I'm having someone help me with course development. I'm having an editor help me. I have 600 Forbes posts, 100 videos. The content is, 13 years, and I'm hiring someone to help me parcel those out and separate them into categories. You want to get hired, here's what you need. You want a better LinkedIn profile, here's what you need. So those are just, I think it's been a month since I've been using leverage. Those are just the initial ideas. Sky's the limit. I love it. I'm so happy to be a leverage client.
All right. Well, I'm happy to have you as a client and grow with you and your business and see what we can make together.
Thank you so much for all you're doing. I appreciate it, and for having me.
All right. Well, thank you for joining today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Leverage Podcast. Leverage is an on-demand outsourcing platform that helps small business owners and entrepreneurs scale their business. We have experts that can set up marketing and sales funnels, email marketing, podcasts, social media curation, paid media, and much more. Grow your business overnight with a team of experts you can trust to deliver. Accomplish more. Visit getleverage.com.